Ride-sharing service Uber had been something of a media darling, that is, until reporters started looking into some of the startup's questionable safety practices. Friday on Beat the Press, Northeastern University professor Dan Kennedy said general dislike of cab companies is one reason Uber evaded press scrutiny for so long.
What Uber was able to take advantage of is that the cab companies are over-regulated. But some of the regulations make sense. They guarantee there's some guarantee of some safety.
You mean they want the drivers to know where they're going?
That the drivers might know where they're going. And I think that the press is finally waking up to the fact that, okay, the cab industry is over-regulated, but nevertheless, there's a reason for those regulations, and Uber is the proof.
All right, well, discontent with Uber certainly isn't new. In fact, several drivers have banded together in a class action lawsuit against the company, claiming Uber misclassifies them as independent contractors and owes them money for expenses like gas and vehicle maintenance. My next guest filed that suit. Shannon Lease Reardon is a Boston-based labor lawyer who specializes in class action lawsuits. Welcome to Greater Boston. So, Shannon, one of the big issues is the tipping policy. One of my drivers was telling me this weekend that if they make $1,000 a week, Uber takes 25% of that right off the top. But he's saying, well, wait a second, they should take 25% after we get the tip, so 25% after $850. Is that part of what your lawsuit is about?
Yes, that's part of our lawsuit. Similar to the cases that I filed several years ago on behalf of the Sky Caps, that people think that the tip is included because Uber has advertised to the public that there's no need to tip. The tip is included, so the drivers aren't getting what drivers would typically get from customers.
So, but is it technically included or not? Or is it just simply an hourly rate?
Well, it's not an hourly rate. There's a fare system, and so the drivers get whatever's left after Uber takes its cut, but they don't carve out a portion for a tip for them as they've led the public to believe.
So when an Uber driver signs a contract, do they think they're getting tips, or is it clear how the system works?
Well, I've talked to a lot of drivers who are confused about it. It wasn't completely clear to them. If you read all the fine print in the contract, it is spelled out there. But the biggest issue, though, is that it's the customers, the public, that we say has been duped into thinking there's no need to tip. Leave your cash in your pocket, because Uber is trying to keep down. It's in such fierce competition with other companies. It's trying to keep down its prices, and that's one way of artificially making it look like their prices are cheaper than they would be if people were leaving tips.
What about some of their other practices? Are you getting involved in things like that surge pricing, which is if it's raining out like today or it's a busy night in town, they get into these bidding wars with customers?
Yes, that's something that I've heard a lot of complaints about, but it's not part of our lawsuit. Our lawsuit is on behalf of the drivers for the tips issue, like I just explained, as well as having drivers have to bear the expenses of being employees because they're misclassified as independent contractors. So
independent contractors, so that they sign up and they say, well, you should, if you're a freelancer, you go ahead and pay for your own gas and take it off on your IRS. Don't make me pay for it. Why isn't that a reasonable approach? That a driver, deducts his gas and other expenses at the end of the year rather than have the company pay for it?
Well, it's a tactic that a lot of companies have used in a bunch of different industries that saves them massively on labor costs to be able to shift the expenses of employment to the workers. Uber is, again, artificially competing by being able to not have to pay those expenses, whereas legitimate companies that have employees will typically pay those expenses. So that's one of the things that we're challenging.
I mean, this company, I don't know the comparisons, but the growth rate is staggering, to the point where I had a driver over the weekend and said, there are so many drivers now. They're competing against each other, and it's like a race to the finish there, to who can get there first. But you can't control that.
Right. I've been hearing complaints from drivers about a lot of topics, and one of the topics that they are upset about is that the Uber is essentially flooding the market with drivers because Uber doesn't care. They want the volume to be as high as possible. That means you can have drivers out there on the roads struggling to make minimum wage for the time that they're out there because there's so many drivers, more than are needed for the business demand. And of course, as independent contractors, they're not guaranteed to even make minimum wage. So that's part of what our lawsuit is seeking.
Many of them seem happier rather than working under the restrictions of a cab company who can be, as we've seen from the Boston Globe report, nickel-diming you in other ways, making you pay extra gas fees and rent for the car, even though you've already leased the car or the medallion or whatever it is?
Yes, that's true, and we're challenging that against the cab companies also. But the point is, there are drivers who have been happier with the system because of their relative freedoms, but that doesn't make the system legal. Just because they have the freedom to decide when they want to work, they can still be employees under the law, and there are a lot of cases that have said that.
Is this going to go to trial, or are they going to settle?
It's still way too early to tell, but I'm expecting it's going to be a long fight.
Well, you have a good track record. We'll see what happens there. All right.
Thank you.
Shannon Lees Rudin, thanks so much for coming.